Okay, so we come back to our study in Ezekiel. Welcome back. We've been off for a couple of weeks now because of our schedule. And we're going to be taking a look at chapters 21 all the way through to chapter 30. Let me remind myself too tonight. Now, that's a pretty broad swipe. And the reason we're going to do it is because if we take more than just kind of one night to see the overview of this, you'll get very frustrated with me because a lot of this stuff is repetitive. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to take a look, first of all, at this section down here, 24 through 33, which is called the Oracles Against the Nations. Now, we're starting in chapter 21 tonight as we didn't finish kind of the information that Ezekiel directed toward his own people against Israel. So we're going to kind of finish this midsection. Chapters 1 through 11 is the vision of God's presence. Chapters 12 through 33 are these poems, parables, and sign acts. And then as we move toward the end of this study in chapters 34 through 48, you get a couple of passages of scripture that seem to be very intriguing. One is the vision of the valley of dry bones. We'll address that. And then the other is a couple of chapters that give measurements and dimensions of a new temple. And of course, that has become this basis for end time prophecy that Israel has to rebuild a temple, but the dimensions are so big. And when you then move it toward the book of Revelation, where you see this idea of the temple and a new Jerusalem, you'll go, nah, this is probably not literal. This is probably symbolic in a variety of different ways. So that's where we're going as we kind of begin to look toward the end of this particular study. So you're going to turn to chapter 21 of Ezekiel tonight. And in chapters 21 through 24, we finish off these oracles that are given against the nation of Israel. Here's what I want you to look for. This is kind of the ultimate trash talk that Ezekiel is directing toward his own people. He's going to equate their morality and their religious rituals in in comparison with the Canaanites. So remember, when you go earlier in the Old Testament, they were to eradicate the Canaanites theoretically as they moved into the Promised Land. But now it seems as though they are imitating them. Secondly, this section, like a lot of Ezekiel, has a lot of metaphors. And these metaphors, I think, are stated in a powerful way that is used as a cognitive vehicle to communicate something. It's something that they can't forget in the way it is constructed. And then number three, there are some difficult passages in this section that force us in many ways to wrestle with how is God governing the cosmos, and why is he treating his own people this way? So to get started, we jump right into chapter 21, and I'm going to read just a few summary type verses. So we're not going to go through the whole chapter, but the image that is used in chapter 21 is a drawn sword of God. Now, this is reflecting an ancient assumption in all religions, not just in Judaism, that God is a mighty warrior. And of course, every country thinks that their God is the ultimate warrior and fights on their behalf. So when they lose in battle, when you have this insatiable search for power among these different empires and people groups, then it becomes a theological conundrum in terms of why is God letting us down? Why is God forsaking us? Now, the one that is going to be the aggressor and the sword that God is going to use is Nebuchadnezzar. We met him in the book of Daniel when we did a study in Daniel. Now, the drawn sword of the Lord is something that is using this militaristic imagery. And you'll notice if you look at chapter 21, again, this common phrase that we have seen in past weeks, son of man, or in some translations it says, O mortal one, set your face against Jerusalem and against the sanctuary. So that's what this is all about. It is about a condemnation of what the people are doing in the temple. And here's the image. It says, This is what the Lord says, I am against you. I will draw my sword from its scabbard and cut off from you both the righteous and the wicked. Everybody gets swept away. It's not just the wicked, it's also the righteous as well. And this is where that theological conundrum comes into place. How is God governing the cosmos, and why do the righteous get swept up in this judgment? It says that again in verse 4, because I'm going to cut off the righteous and the wicked. My sword will be unsheathed against everyone from south to north. So this metaphor is coming at a time where it's a threat that is being used in a way to scare the people. And we know that's the motivation. If you come on down, it says, Every heart will melt, and every hand go limp, and every spirit will become faint, and every knee become weak as water. So Ezekiel is doing the ultimate power play here. And I think what he's doing is he's going to suggest that Nebuchadnezzar is God's servant in all of this to correct his people who have violated the covenant that God made with them, first at Mount Sinai, then the Davidic covenant, the Levitical laws that are given, that type of thing. So then you'll notice in the chapter it goes into poetry. So right after this comment, you'll see indentations beginning in verse 8, which suggests this is all figurative type language used in poetry form, but it might suggest also a bit of historical imagery. If you come down to verse 14, it says, So then, son of man, prophesy and strike your hands together. Let the sword strike twice, even 3 times. Ultimately, Nebuchadnezzar invaded the land 3 times. The first time he comes in, he takes away the important people. Ezekiel, Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are those. And what happens is the leaders are taken back into Babylonian. So you see, Babylon's sword is against Jerusalem, has taken captive its leaders. But what's interesting in this chapter is in verse 18 says, The word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, mark out 2 roads for the sword of the king of Babylon to take both, starting from the same country. So he's going to march invading these territories, and he comes to a point. Nebuchadnezzar needs to make a decision. Is he going to go to the right or is he going to go to the left? Notice verse 20. It says, Mark out 1 road for the sword to come against Rabbah of the Ammonites, and another against Judah and fortified Jerusalem. It was almost as if Nebuchadnezzar is trying to make a decision, which should I conquer first? Should I go this way, take out the Ammonites, or should I take out the Israelites? So he turns to divination, really, to make the decision for him. You'll notice it says here, he will cast lots with arrows, he will consult his idols, and he will examine the liver. So it's fortune telling. It's ancient fortune telling to help Nebuchadnezzar make a decision on which way he should go. Ultimately, he will invade Jerusalem. And then you see at the rest of the chapter, um,
he will make a comment about the Ammonites as well, and then it launches into another section of poetry beginning in verse 28. All you see the indentations again, telling us that now he's using um, figurative and symbolic language. The You'll notice it says here down in verse 32, you will be fuel for the fire, your blood will be shed in your land. So there's going to be a lot of violence, and this violence will then give this image a bloody city. And that's chapter 22. So in chapter 22, there are continued accusations that are being made against the people of God, but now we're given a reason why these accusations are made. Beginning in chapter 22, verse 2, it says, Son of man, will you judge her? Will you judge the city of bloodshed? So I sure wish we knew more historically about what is the backdrop to some of these accusations, because it's hard to fit together a historical timeline using the materials that we have. But it seems as though in the continued conflict in the ancient Near East, there was continual war, there was continual invasion, and specifically in Jerusalem, there was the shedding of blood, and as a result of that, the leaders are captured, taken back to Babylon. But then Nebuchadnezzar, when Zedekiah turns to Egypt and tries to make an alliance with Egypt rather than staying true as a vassal state to Babylon, he will invade a second time. And Nebuchadnezzar will really burn the city and the temple to the ground eventually. It will take some time to do that. But we're never given a real reason until you come to verse 6 in chapter 22. And it gives a reason why God is allowing the Babylonians to be the instrument. It says here, see how each of the princes of Israel who are in you uses his power to shed blood. So um, here is the ultimate poetic justice, that those who shed blood are going to find that their city is a city of blood. And then verse 7, it says, in you they have treated father and mother with contempt. In you they have oppressed the alien, mistreated the fatherless and the widow. Wow. These three things: you oppress the alien, mistreat the fatherless, who are orphans, right? That's the idea behind it, is that without a father, and the widow who's lost her husband. Now, think about those three things in our own world today. Those are the areas that are most mistreated. When you think about immigration, when you think about those that are going to suffer the most when certain government programs are pulled out of schools, it's those kids. And also when there is the manipulating of Social Security and Medicare and that type of thing. uh, it's kind of scary to think that this is what God has condemned in the ancient world, Israel for, and we might find ourselves repeating those very same things. So these accusations come. And then in verse 17, the picture is Israel being put in a furnace. Okay. Notice it says, then the word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, the house of Israel has become dross to me. All of them are the copper, tin, iron, and lead left inside the furnace. They are but the dross of silver. So last Wednesday night was our anniversary, and one reason that we took a break was we wanted to go out not only to dinner, but we went down to Chagrin Falls, and we went to the Glass Asylum to do a make a piece of glass work. And the furnaces and the doors that they open when they take a rod to get that initial glass that it's going to be shaped and stuff, it's like over 1300 degrees. And I mean, all they have to do is open that up just a bit. And I mean, the heat comes out and stuff. So, this is the image here that is being used, that Israel is being put in that furnace to be melted down. And it might be that the dross is removed. And here's the reason I say about being melted down. Look at verse 20. It says, as men gather silver, copper, iron, lead, and tin into a furnace to melt it with a fiery blast, so will I gather you in my anger and my wrath and put you inside the city and melt you. So the invasion of Babylon is considered to be like a fiery furnace that is to purify the people. And what is it that they need to be purified from? Idolatry is one, bloodshed's another, and then social justice is the third thing that we saw against the alien, the fatherless, and the widow. So that is pretty much the essence of chapter 22. There's other things that are said there. Some of the things are repeated. If you look at verse 25, there's a conspiracy of her princes within her, like a roaring lion tearing its prey. They devour people, take treasures and precious things, and make many widows within her. So again, what all empires do is they take from the poor. They're the reverse Robin Hood, okay? They take from the poor and give to the rich rather than Robin Hood taking from the rich and giving to the poor. So that is the essence of the bloody city. So we have seen the drawn sword, we have seen the bloody city, and then the next chapter talks about two adulterous sisters. So, what you find is that the metaphor that is used quite often in the Old Testament is God's people are his bride, and they run after other lovers. In this case, it's the north and the south. It specifically mentions Samaria, which is to the north, and then Jerusalem, which is to the south. These two adulterous sisters are looked upon as prostitutes. Take a look at verse 1. It says, the word of the Lord came to me, son of man, there were two women, daughters of the same mother. Okay, these are all related people, part of the 12 tribes, right? It says they became prostitutes in Egypt. Now that's interesting. This is when they were in captivity, but they looked at some of the Egyptian gods, and ultimately God would strike the Egyptian gods with the plagues, but still they had a heart for it. And then look at verse 3. They became prostitutes in Egypt, engaging in prostitution from their youth, from the beginning of their people. In that land, their breasts were fondled and their virgin bosoms caressed. So it's very vivid imagery here. And then it says the older was named Oholah and her sister Oholibah. Now those are two related things. You see on the screen here, Oholah means her own tent, and Oholibah means my tent is with her. Um, it's talking about the northern kingdom, 10 tribes of the north, and the southern kingdom, the two tribes to the south. The northern kingdom, Babylon does not take them into captivity. It's Assyria, which is another major player at the time. But the two southern tribes are taken into captivity by Babylon. Now, when you look down through the chapter, this stands out. It mentions the Assyrians in verse 5. Oholah is Samaria, tribes of the north. She lusted after her lover, the Assyrians, warriors clothed in blue, governors and commanders, all of them handsome young men and mounted horsemen. Okay, so that's the north. And then it says in verse 9, I handed her over to her lover the Assyrians for whom she lusted. The Assyrians will invade and take the 10 tribes captive. And then it turns to the southern group in verse 11. Her sister, Aholabah, saw this, yet in her lust and prostitution, she became more depraved than her sister. She too lusted after the Assyrians. All of this is talking about political alliances and who they are looking toward to safeguard their security and that type of thing. Um, and then verse 17, it says, Then the Babylonians came to her to the bed of love, and in their lust they defiled her. So the Babylonians are pictured as coming and raping the two southern tribes. But the picture is of two adulterous sisters that have both turned away from God. And as a result of that, well, what will take place is the destruction of the temple. Now, the destruction of the temple is kind of framed in chapters 24 and then again in chapter 33. In between, though, are these oracles against the nations, against those that are related ethnically to the Israelites, but they have their own entity, they're their own empires and that type of thing. What takes place when you come to chapter 24 is now in this chapter, the imagery now is of a boiling pot. So you see, all of these are kind of stacked on top of one another. It's all metaphorical type language and stuff. So we're going to see in a few moments that Ezekiel is going to have a sign act that he is going to carry out to communicate his message. And unfortunately, the sign act is going to be the loss of his wife. His wife is going to die, and he's not allowed to mourn. He is to keep his priestly garments on, and he is not going to mourn the loss of his wife. And that does go back also to Leviticus chapter 10, where Aaron is given similar type instructions as well. What's important to note here, though, is in chapter 24, if you go over to chapter 24 and you come down to verse 16, there's a real important word that is used in verse 16. So the word of the Lord came to me. Here's verse 16. Son of man, with one blow, I am about to take away from you the delight of your eyes. So that word there that is used, blow, can also be translated strike. And it's the same word that was used in Exodus when God struck the Egyptians with plagues. Okay. So there's a literary link that's being made there. You'll notice that this idea of the destruction of the temple is one where Yahweh is assuming the role in all of this, but um, using the king of Babylon. So come back up to verse 2 of chapter 24. Son of man, record this date, this very date, because the king of Babylon has laid siege to Jerusalem this very day. Now, the image that is going to be used is of a boiling pot. So we've seen every chapter has its own image. Are you following that? It's metaphorical, it's symbolic. Now the image is of a boiling pot. Take a look. It says here in verse 3, tell this rebellious house a parable and say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Put on the cooking pot, put it on and pour water into it and put into it pieces of meat, all the choice pieces, the leg and shoulder, and so forth. So this parable of the boiling pot is this idea of um, an iron cauldron that is being used for making stew, and the temperature continues to go up, and it continues to soften the contents in it. So when we make stew at home, I should say when Esty makes stew, she puts the meat in the pot and does it very slow over a period of time to soften it up. Just kind of um, if you just kind of put it in a frying pan, it'll be tough. It'll be too tough to eat. So it's got to be the steam within the pot that will soften it. And so this image here, the parable of the boiling pot, I think is this idea that God is kind of the cook, and the pot's steam represents his wrath, and it's supposed to soften the hearts of the people over a period of time. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. So so the parable of the boiling pot. Now, you move from metaphor and you move from parable to a sign act. And in chapter 24, verse 15, it says here, the word of the Lord came to me, son of man, with one blow I am about to take away from you the delight of your eyes. Now, at this point, the delight of your eyes is a little bit ambiguous. Is he talking about the city of Jerusalem? What is he talking about here? And it becomes clear. It says here next, do not lament or weep or shed any tears. Groan quietly, do not mourn for the dead. Keep your turban fastened and your sandals on your feet. Do not cover the lower part of your face or eat the customary food of mourners. So he is not to carry out the traditional acts of mourning. He's thinking, at least at this point, that he's talking about his people, he's talking about the city of Jerusalem. But when you get to verse 18, it's about his own wife. Look, it says, so I spoke to the people in the morning, and in the evening, my wife died. My wife died. So there's a blow that is coming that is connected to everything that took place in Exodus. And then if you look at some of these cross references here, we're not going to look at these up, but that word is also used sometimes for the outbreak of disease. So it seems as though the word that is being used is drawing upon images where either there has been an enemy that has inflicted punishment, or perhaps there has been a plague that has in some way affected the people of God. But what's important here is that he's not to mourn publicly. Now, that's a bit unfair, isn't it? So his wife dies, and then it goes uh, on here in verse 18. The next morning I did as I had been commanded. And then the people asked me, won't you tell us what these things have to do with us? So his wife dies, but he doesn't go into uh, a sitting Shiva, that is that period of mourning. He keeps his priestly garments on, and he is to continue to function as a priest and a prophet to these people. So he responds. Take a look at verse 20. The word of the Lord came to me, say to the house of Israel, this is what the sovereign Lord says. I am about to desecrate my sanctuary, the stronghold in which you take pride, the delight of your eyes, the object of your affection. Oh, this is very, very subtle, but very powerful. As Ezekiel loses his wife, so God has lost his wife, which is his people. And so in all of this, this becomes a sign to them. You see that in verse 27. At that time, your mouth will be open, you will speak with him and will no longer be silent. So will So you will be a sign to them, and they will know that I am the Lord. So that kind of completes this oracle against the nation of Israel. And then in chapter 25, all of a sudden, he begins to address all the surrounding peoples. So in your Bible, there should be headings there that says a prophecy against Amnon, a prophecy against Moab, a prophecy against Edom, a prophecy against Philistia. Maybe your Bible might have those as headings. Maybe they won't. I don't know. But um, basically, there is this loss of the beloved in Jerusalem. And as a result of that, there's these compositional links that go prior to what has come in the book of Ezekiel. Remember, he did some strange things like carrying luggage through the city at night. And now he's abstaining from mourning for his dead wife. And then Ezekiel describes this as a sign for Israel. And then all of a sudden, in chapters 25 through 32, it turns. And no longer is Israel the focus, but it's the other nations. Now, you're going to see in a second this chart, and I'll come to this in a minute and explain how it kind of breaks down. But here's what I want you to think about in these chapters here. Number one, Israel is ethnically related to many of these surrounding nations. Isn't it interesting of all that we're seeing, even in our current news cycle, of what is being destroyed in Palestine by the nation of Israel? Over 65,000 people have been killed, 65,000 Palestinians. These are brothers. They're related. And there is a total disregard for the fact that they're siblings. These nations around Israel have some blood ties to Israel itself. And maybe the story is trying to help us see how this is brother against brother, and it should recall possibly the story of Cain and Abel, where two brothers are pitted against each other. Now, these oracles are designed in two cycles of seven, and this might connect us back to Genesis chapter 1 and Genesis chapter 7, where there are the themes of decreation and recreation that uses this same idea. It's interesting where Ezekiel stops and expands. He'll have short little things to be said around about these surrounding nations, but he camps on the king of Tyre and gives a lot of text there. So here's how it breaks down. When you look at these oracles against the seven nations that surround Israel, what's taking place is 18 oracles in all. And they're kind of organized in a symmetry of patterns of seven. Now, that takes you back to creation, the creation week, 7 days. Seven is an important figurative symbol in all the Old Testament. But here's what I want you to notice here. Bullet point number 2, located precisely in the middle of this material in terms of word count, the nations 1 through 6 have 97 verses. Now, remember, verses are added later in our translations. So this wouldn't be true in the ancient Near East when the scroll of Ezekiel is being used. But the amount of text is interesting. And the way it breaks down is these 6 oracles against the nations, total 97 verses. And then nation number 7 has 97 verses just for itself. So a lot more text is given. And what we find taking place is it is directed not only toward these nations, but Israel is included in that. So he's continuing his criticism of his own people as well as these surrounding nations. Now, these nations that I'm going to show you in the chart, they all helped Babylon in one way or another accomplish the invasion of Jerusalem. And you'll notice that that takes place in the book of Second Kings. You almost have to read that as your historical backdrop. But there are these nations that come to the aid of Babylon as kind of as vassals of Babylon, carrying out Nebuchadnezzar's priorities. And as a result of that, there's condemnation that they did this against their own people. Okay, so these nations they are warring against family, not Babylon. Babylon's not related to them, but they're doing the bidding of Babylon. Do you get the picture there? They've ratted their own people, their own siblings out, and by helping Nebuchadnezzar. So here's how it breaks down, and this is the best way to summarize this section. This section here has an oracle against Ammon in chapter 25, Moab, same chapter, Edom, and Philistia. So there's four nations in chapter 25 that there, and you can look and you can see it, they all begin the same way. This is what the Lord says against so and so. And then they'll mention something specific. For example, so when you come to chapter 25, let's go down to Moab. It says, this is what the sovereign Lord says, because Moab and Seir said, look, the house of Judah has become like all the other nations. Therefore, I will expose the flank of Moab at the beginning at its frontier towns. And then it gives the names of that. I will give Moab along with the Ammonites to the people of the east as a possession. What we don't know is the historical details of that. What did they do? And what prompted that type of aggression against Israel? So you almost have to take this by faith. You know what I'm saying? You don't know historically how to put all this together. Now, notice here, when you get to chapters 26 through 28, all of a sudden the text stops and concentrates on Tyre and Sidon. And there's 7 oracles directed against them specifically. So you have 1, 1, 1, 1. The 5th and the 6th have 7 oracles in total. And then there's this little parentheses in 2 verses in chapter 28 where there's the promise that Israel is going to be restored. And then chapters 29 through 32, it camps out, and there are 7 specific oracles against Egypt. So, quick, Ammon, Moab, Edom, Philistia, boom, 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 boom. Let's camp on Tyre and Sidon. Let's give Israel a little bit of hope, and then let's camp on Egypt. So when you total these up, 7 plus 7 is 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 different oracles that are given, and 7 of them against Tyre and 7 of them against Egypt. Now, why? Why is that the case? I think it's because of the leaders, and we'll come to that in a second. The king of Tyre and the king of Egypt, or the way we say it, Pharaoh. This is directed specifically against their leadership and what they chose to do against the nation of Israel. So there's some common themes in all these oracles. Number 1, God's over human affairs. Number 2, God will use them as his vessel, but he will then hold them accountable for what they did. This is where the mystery comes into play. Okay, what you're telling me is you're going to use all these people to punish and chastise and discipline your own people, but then you're going to hold them responsible for doing that, which is interesting. The interplay between God's providence and human responsibility is all through these oracles. What is God's ultimate goal in all of this? His ultimate goal is to make himself known to all the nations, not just to Israel. So we talked a little bit about those first four. Now let's camp out for a second when we come to the oracle against Tyre. Go over to chapter 28. And in chapter 28, this is such an interesting passage because this is one of the passages that is used to try to give some explanation for the origin of Satan. Okay, I'll show you what I mean in a moment. Verse 1, it says this: The word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, say to the ruler of Tyre. This is what the sovereign Lord says. In the pride of your heart, you say, I am God. I sit on a throne of a God in the heart of the seas, but you are a man and not a God, though you think you are as wise as a God. So this guy is setting himself up as a God, and it's specifically talking about the ruler of Tyre here. And we get a little bit of what his motivation is. Verse 4, by your wisdom and understanding, you have gained great wealth for yourself. You've amassed gold and silver. So, you know, he has the motivation of every king that invades other countries. There's either some type of resources that they want, like Putin wants the minerals out of Ukraine, or there's territory that they want to control, or there's money to be made from the spoils of war. And then you'll notice as you go on down in the text, now this is where it gets a little bit, how do I want to put this? Creative. Maybe that's a good word. When you come down to verse 14, so he's talking about the ruler of Tyre, da 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 da. Let's back up for a second to verse 11. The word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, take up a lament concerning the king of Tyre and say to him, This is what the sovereign Lord says. You were a model of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. You were in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone adorn you, ruby, topaz, emerald, chrysolite, onyx, jasper, sapphire, turquoise, and beryl. Your settings and mountings were made of gold, and on that day you were created. They were prepared. You were anointed as a guardian cherub. Okay, so a cherub we assume is what? It is an angel, a spiritual being. So what scholars have done with this passage is say, yeah, he's talking about the king of Tyre, but it's more than the king of Tyre. There is a power behind the king of Tyre, and since it refers to Eden, since it refers to the garden of God, since it refers to a cherub, this must be talking about Satan. Well, there's a lot of assumption in that, okay? What possibly could be taking place here is the king is being pictured maybe as a quasi mythical being as he is in the Garden of Eden. This might refer to a supernatural being, it might not. But I'm just making you aware this is one of the passages that is sometimes used to try to describe the origin of Satan, that he was originally an angel that fell. He fell and he took other angels with him. And of course, that's using Revelation chapter 12, where he's pictured as a dragon that sweeps away a third of the stars of heaven. But when you're using symbolic language, when you're using figurative communication, you have to assume a lot. And I'm just telling you, that might not be what it's saying at all. Maybe what it's saying is this guy had some abilities that were over and above the Ammonites, the Moabites, the Edomites, and even the Philistines. And as a result, here he has this power that he could do what he wanted to. Now, when you come down, if you come to verse 18, we know what his motivation is and some of his tactics. It says, by your many sins and dishonest trade, you have desecrated your sanctuaries. So evidently, this guy, the ruler of Tyre, could not be trusted. That he took advantage of the smaller nations around him, and as a result, God is going to hold him responsible. So that's Tyre. Then he talks about Sidon in the rest of the chapter, which doesn't give as much detail. Then you get to chapter 29, and it talks about the king of Egypt, which is Pharaoh. So um, it says here in chapter 29, verse 1, in the 10th year, in the 10th month, on the 12th day, the word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, set your face against Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, and prophesy against him and against all Egypt. Speak to him and say, this is what the sovereign Lord says, I'm against you, Pharaoh, king of Egypt, you great monster lying among your streams. Remember in the series I did on Sunday morning, Chaos Dragon, this is what is picturing Pharaoh. He's a chaos dragon. He represents that which had been a part of the experience from the beginning of creation, the sea monster, Leviathan, those images that we talked about on Sunday morning. The thing to keep in mind to simplify the whole thing is you have Babylon, you have Assyria, you have Egypt. They're all major players. They're all powerful. They all have resources. They all have armies. They all have chariots. They all have horses. And they're vying for control over the area. And here is the nation of Israel and Judah, well, all the 12 tribes really, that sits right in the middle of all those power brokers. So the core metaphor here, I think, that ties it all together is pride. These people that have the ability to use their resources to control other people. And of course, that's where it's often then tied back into Satan as well. You can read, if you want, the details of that on this slide. So when you go on into chapter 30, um, again, there's the prediction of the downfall of the Egyptians. If you look at chapter 30, verse 6, it says, this is what the Lord says, the allies of Egypt will fall and her proud strength will fail. If you jump over to verse 10, I will put an end to the hordes of Egypt by the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon. He and his army, the most ruthless of nations. So there's this international war that is going on. If we could use the word kind of like a world war, there's a world war that's kind of taking place in the ancient Near East here. So what you can look for in all of this in chapter 31, again, poetry. When you look at your Bible, you'll see the indentation in chapter 31. It goes back to a metaphor of a cedar in Lebanon, this huge, powerful tree that will fall. That's kind of the image. These nations are going to fall because ultimately God is in control. And specifically, Egypt is going to fall and Pharaoh is going to fall. And so then you come to chapter 32, and then you have a lament, again, indentions, poetry that's taking place here. But we do know what it means. In verse 2, Son of man, take up a lament concerning Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, and say, You are like a lion among the nations, and you are like a monster in the seas. There's that chaos dragon imagery again. Thrashing about in your streams, churning the water with your feet, and muddying the streams. But this is what the sovereign Lord says: with a great throng of people, I will cast my net over you, and they will haul you up in my net. So God is going to use other nations to chastise chastise Egypt. And then the imagery gets really bizarre. I will throw you on the land and hurl you on the open field. I will let all the birds of the air settle on you, and all the beasts of the earth gorge themselves on you. This is all very powerful symbolic language that is being used. Um, don't take this literal. I mean, these aren't literal beasts that are eating some type of literal, uh, you know, person. It's this image that is communicating the power play that is taking place among all these nations. And here is Israel that is going to sit right in the middle of it. She's already experienced so much heartache as they see a second invasion on the horizon that will ultimately destroy the temple and Jerusalem itself. So that is kind of the essence. When you come to chapter 33 next week, Ezekiel will become a watchman, kind of a sentry that's overseeing all of this taking place, and then it comes back to narrative. You don't have as much poetry if you kind of page through chapter 33, 34, 35, 36 on up to 37, where you have the Valley of Dry Bones vision. All of that is narrative, which means it has a little bit more of a historical feel rather than a poetical feel. Okay, so let me pause and see if you have any. I'm going to pause the recording and see if you have any questions that might be helpful for me to explain a little bit more. Is there anything that comes to mind? You're not being recorded, so you can not be embarrassed by any question. And there's no bad question. In material like this, we're all confused in some ways. So, any thoughts that you have? No? All right. Well, we covered a lot of chapters tonight. And if this is the type of thing that interests you, you can go back and sit and chew on it a little bit in any chapter and look at the imagery that is being used there, which is very powerful type imagery. But we'll come back to more of a narrative feel next week. So, all right. Um, all right. No other questions, comments? I think this is my last statement for tonight. I really do think that when you read this text closely and you think about what causes wars and bloodshed in our world, it seems to be the same motivations over
Mhm.
and over and over again.
Mhm.
Taking other people's resources, taking other people's lands,
Yeah.
and using it for your own pride and profit. And so that's probably the best way of appropriating a book like Ezekiel, because you're not going to find five personal principles for your life in the book of Ezekiel. It's big, it's broad, it's global in nature. So
Yeah.
all right, well, we got to pull in a Cavs win tonight. Okay, they lost two in a row.
You gonna stay up and watch it?
No, I won't. That's too late. But
Too late, huh? Yeah.
yeah, but we want to get them back on the winning streak, right?
Helen can stay up.
Yeah, Helen can stay
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not. You're muted, Helen, so we can't hear you. But I'm not sure she's able to probably even get the game out there, to tell you the
No.
truth.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's local,
Uh-huh.
here. But
Huh.
Well, they're on a West Coast
Yeah.
swing, so they're up in Sacramento tonight, I think. So, yeah. Anyways, well, while Helen is trying to figure out how she can unmute herself, write it down, Helen. You'll have to tell us next week.
Okay, you got it
There
now?
you go.
Got it, yay!
Yay.
Okay. I don't know how to get the TV to get like the Cavs and stuff out here. Now I do know that they play Suns on Friday. And I thought about getting tickets to that, but we have something else going on Friday night, so I probably won't get to watch the Cavs or go to it, either one
Yeah.
on Friday.
Do you have an ability to record the
Record?
game?
Yeah, we can record it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
But the only way you,
Mary will enjoy watching the game as much as I will, but she's mad at the Suns. Big Suns fan. She's mad at them.
well, probably the only way you could get to watch the Cavs out there while you're in Phoenix is to have that NBA package that you buy.
Wouldn't
Yeah.
they show anything out there locally though? Or
Well,
is that,
they will against the Suns. That'll be on.
yeah, but nothing from California or anything.
No,
No.
no. So
Yeah.
so yeah, you guys get some of the games back there. Where do you get them? Now that Valleys isn't doing it.
It's
Well, they
it's
changed.
FanDuel.
Yeah, they changed the name of it.
Yeah,
All the
FanDuel
games
Sports
are on
Network.
FanDuel?
FanDuel, I think bought Bally's out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, we get the same amount of games as we have in previous years. It's just named different. That's all.
Are they going to be covering the Guardians too?
That's undecided yet. They're still negotiating for
Okay.
cable. I guess they're negotiating from what I heard between Spectrum and AT&T DirecTV, but they haven't made a decision yet.
Okay.
Otherwise, you could do the CLE Guardians.tv or whatever. And you have
It's
to buy a package.
$100.
Yeah, $100 for this for a year.
It's
I don't know if that means just till what, October when they're done, or does that mean the whole year, like from March to next March?
No, I think it's probably the season.
Just the season,
I would think. Yeah.
yeah.
But
Okay.
anyways, if you love baseball, I guess it's with the amount of games, 100 and some odd games, it's less than $1 a game. But
yeah.
anyways, it just kind of it doesn't sit right with me that they find
No.
all these other ways to
It irks me that it's all on cable and stuff. It should be on a regular channel. Come on. If they're
that's how they
Well,
generate.
there are some games on Channel 8 this year, like 8 games or something, but not every game. No.
Well, that's how they generate more money.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
Guardians
that's the
get money. Yeah,
almighty dollar.
yeah.
Well,
They always come.
that's what you need if you're going to pay somebody $10 million a year,
Yeah.
120 or whatever. So
It all comes down to the dollar, no matter what you're talking about.
exactly.
Right.
All right, Mark. I will see you tomorrow at McKinley.
Okay. All right.
right.
Good.
All right. Okay, let's call it a night. All right.
Okay.
Have a
Okay.
good night, everybody.
Night.
We'll
All right,
see
good
you.
night.
Good
Thank
night.
you.